March 1218. A Mongol trade caravan arrives at the city of Otrar in modern-day Kazakhstan. 450 merchants, tons of silk, furs, gold. They're carrying diplomatic passports from Genghis Khan himself. The governor of Otrar accuses them of being spies, seizes everything, and executes every single merchant. Genghis Khan sends diplomats demanding justice. The Khwarezmian Shah has them killed too. 1 year later, the Khwarezmian Empire no longer exists. Cities burned, armies annihilated, millions dead. All because someone messed with Mongol trade. If that doesn't tell you how seriously the Mongols took commerce, nothing will. Today we're breaking down why trade wasn't just important to the Mongol Empire. It was absolutely vital to how they conquered and ruled the world. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and let's dive into some serious Mongol madness. Why the Mongols needed trade. Most nomadic people are self-sufficient. Hunt, herd animals, make what you need. The Mongols, they made almost nothing except meat, leather, and felt. No crops, no metalworking, no textiles beyond basic wool. They needed everyone else. Chinese silk, Persian steel, European gold, Indian spices. If the Mongols wanted it, they had to trade for it. This wasn't weakness, it was their entire strategy. Genghis Khan understood something revolutionary. Controlling trade routes gave you more power than controlling farmland. Before the Mongols, the Silk Road was fragmented. Dozens of kingdoms, each demanding tolls and tribute. Bandits everywhere. A merchant traveling from China to Europe would pay taxes maybe 30 times. Sometimes the same warlord would charge you twice at different checkpoints just because he could. It was expensive, dangerous, and slow. The Mongols unified everything under one rule. From Beijing to Baghdad to the Black Sea. Suddenly you weren't crossing hostile borders every few hundred miles. You were crossing one empire, and that empire had a vested interest in keeping you alive and spending money. The Pax Mongolica. Historians call it Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace. From roughly 1250 to 1350, you could travel from Korea to Hungary more safely than you could cross medieval France. The Mongols didn't just allow trade, they engineered it. First move, security. Mongol law stated that merchants under their protection couldn't be attacked, even if they came from enemy nations. Violate that? Your entire city gets erased. Genghis Khan meant it. After Otrar, nobody questioned whether the Mongols would retaliate for harming traders. Second move, status. In China and Persia, merchants were bottom tier socially. Scholars and farmers outranked them. The Mongols flipped that. They gave merchants higher status than most nobility. Why? Because merchants brought in goods the empire needed and information the Khans wanted. Third move, infrastructure. This is where it gets brilliant. The Yam system. The Mongols built something called the Yam, a postal relay system stretching across the entire empire. Relay stations every 25 to 40 kilometers. Each station stocked with fresh horses, food, shelter, and rested messengers. A Mongol courier could cover 200 to 300 kilometers per day. That's 120 to 190 miles. For context, the Pony Express in 1860s America, celebrated as incredibly fast, maxed out at 120 kilometers per day. The Mongols were doing double that in the 1200s. How? Simple. You ride hard to the next station, swap to a fresh horse, keep going. No single horse or rider gets exhausted. The message keeps moving. Ogedei Khan, Genghis's son, gave the Yam special attention because Mongol armies moved fast. Their communications had to be faster. And here's the key, merchants could use it. Initially, everyone could. But people started abusing the system, so the Mongols restricted it to official business and approved merchants. If you had a paisa, a golden passport issued by the Khan, you could travel the Yam routes with guaranteed food, shelter, horses, and military protection. Marco Polo had one of these paisas when he traveled to China in 1274. He wrote that it guaranteed everything needful in all the countries through which they should pass, horses, escorts, and in short, whatever they should require. That's not just a passport. That's VIP treatment across an entire continent. The Ortok system. But the Mongols went further. They created the Ortok system. Essentially, merchant partnerships backed by Mongol capital. These were like medieval venture capital firms. A Mongol noble or the Khan himself would invest in a merchant caravan. The merchant would take goods along the Silk Road, sell them, buy new goods, bring them back. Profits got split. If the merchant lost everything to bandits or disaster, the Mongol investor ate the loss. The merchant's liability was capped at their original investment. Sound familiar? That's because it's identical to modern limited liability partnerships. The Mongols invented this in the 1200s. Why would the Mongols risk their capital? Because they made massive profits and gained intelligence. Merchants traveling the empire brought back more than goods. They brought information. What kingdoms were fighting, where harvests failed, which trade routes were becoming dangerous. The Ortok system was economic policy and espionage combined. What actually traded? So what moved along these routes? From east to west, Chinese silk, porcelain, tea and gunpowder, Indian spices, cotton and precious stones, Asian metalwork and carpets. From west to east, European gold, silver, fine cloth and horses, Persian weapons and leather goods, medical manuscripts from Baghdad, astronomical texts, paper currency, which blew Marco Polo's mind because Europe had never seen it. But it wasn't just luxury goods. Ideas traveled faster than merchants. Technologies jumped continents. Printing techniques from China reached Persia. Persian astronomy reached China. European metallurgy techniques spread east. Chinese gunpowder weapons spread west. The Mongols didn't care about cultural purity. They wanted what worked. If Chinese engineers built better siege weapons, hire them. If Persian doctors had better medicine, bring them to Mongolia. If European metalworkers made superior armor, get them into the empire. This created something unprecedented, a meritocratic, multicultural exchange system where competence mattered more than ethnicity or religion. Cities that thrived. Under Mongol rule, cities along the Silk Road exploded. Samarkand became a massive trade hub. Bukhara, which Genghis Khan had burned during his conquest of Khwarezmia, was rebuilt and thrived. Kashgar, Tabriz, Karakorum, the Mongol capital, was built specifically to centralize trade. These cities weren't just markets, they became cultural centers. Scholars from Baghdad taught in Samarkand, Chinese artisans worked in Tabriz, Russian craftsmen lived in Karakorum, European merchants lived in Beijing. For the first time in history, you had truly cosmopolitan cities where people from every corner of Eurasia lived and worked together. The economic impact was staggering. GDP increased across every connected region. New goods created new markets. Merchants who used to make one caravan trip per lifetime could now make 3 or 4. Lower risks, higher profits, more trade. Why it mattered politically? But trade wasn't just economics, it was political control. The Mongols used trade as leverage. Submit to Mongol authority and gain access to the Silk Road with all its benefits. Resist, and you're isolated. Vassal states and tributary kingdoms had strong incentives to cooperate. Their merchant classes got rich, their cities grew, their rulers received luxury goods from across the empire. Why rebel when the current system makes you wealthy? The Mongols didn't need massive standing armies in every province. The threat of losing trade access was often enough. Combined with the Yam system allowing rapid deployment of armies if needed, most regions stayed loyal. This was soft power before anyone called it that. Economic incentives maintaining political stability across 12 million square miles. The largest contiguous land empire in history. The decline. Of course, it couldn't last forever. The same trade routes that brought silk and spices also brought plague. The Black Death likely traveled the Silk Road from Central Asia to Europe in the 1340s, killing maybe a third of Europe's population. As the Mongol Empire fragmented after 1260, civil wars between successor khanates, corruption, incompetent rulers, the unified trade system broke down. Regional khanates started charging their own tolls, security deteriorated, bandits returned. The Yuan dynasty in China fell in 1368. The Golden Horde in Russia fragmented by the 1400s. The Ilkhanate in Persia collapsed. Without central coordination, the Silk Road reverted to its pre-Mongol state. Dangerous, expensive, fragmented. Merchants increasingly turned to sea routes. By the 1400s, maritime trade through the Indian Ocean and around Africa started replacing overland caravans. The age of exploration was partly European merchants looking for ways to bypass the now unstable Silk Road. The legacy. But the impact lasted. The Mongol period proved that integrated global trade was possible. It showed that economic cooperation could transcend cultural and religious boundaries. It demonstrated that protecting merchants and facilitating commerce generated more wealth than extracting tribute from conquered peoples. Modern historians argue the Mongols kick-started globalization 800 years ago. The exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods during Pax Mongolica laid groundwork for the interconnected world we live in today. The Yam system influenced postal services across Asia for centuries. Russia maintained relay stations based on the Mongol model until the 1800s. The concept of standardized weights and measures across trade zones. Mongol innovation. Paper currency accepted across multiple regions. Mongols did it first on a massive scale. Even the idea of protected trade routes enforced by a central authority, that's a Mongol legacy. Modern international trade agreements, the World Trade Organization, the entire concept of free trade zones, they all echo principles the Mongols implemented in the 13th century. The Mongol Empire didn't just happen because of military genius or superior tactics. It happened because Genghis Khan and his successors understood that controlling trade meant controlling wealth, information, and political power. They built the world's fastest communication network. They created financial systems that incentivized merchants to work with the empire. They established security that made long-distance trade practical. They gave merchants status and protection. They unified a vast territory under consistent trade policies. And when someone, like the governor of Otrar, threatened that system, the response was overwhelming and absolute. Trade was that important. The Mongols conquered with swords, but ruled with commerce. They understood something many empires missed. Dead subjects don't pay taxes or produce goods. Living, prosperous subjects generate wealth. Protected merchants bring in goods you can't make yourself. Open trade routes create opportunities for everyone. That's why trade was vital to the Mongol Empire. It wasn't a side benefit of conquest. It was the entire point. If you want more deep dives into how the Mongols actually built and ran their empire, hit that subscribe button. We're breaking down the real history every week. No myths, no Hollywood nonsense. Just what actually happened. Drop a comment telling me what aspect of Mongol history you want next. Weapons? Administration? Daily life? Let me know. The Mongols didn't just change the world through conquest. They changed it through commerce. And that's a legacy worth understanding. That's Mongol madness. See you next time.